Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking one of the most fascinating cultural moments of the entire 20th century. We are looking at a deeply candid conversation from 1971. The interviewer is journalist Pierre Berton, and the subject, a man literally standing on the precipice of global icon status, the one and only Bruce Lee. What we're going to map out today is a mind that is just as sharp, agile, and frankly as powerful as the physical martial arts he's so famous for.
To really get where Bruce's head was at during this exact time, we have to look at the massive crossroads he was standing at. On one hand, he was just on the verge of mainstream stardom in the United States, but on the other, he had just rocketed to absolute, undeniable superstardom as a film actor in Hong Kong. He was basically being pulled in two entirely different directions, balancing two completely different worlds.
So let's look at Section 1, East versus West superstardom, two distinct worlds. Over on the Hong Kong side, he's shooting these wildly successful movies. But, get this, there's a major catch. He only speaks Cantonese, and these are Mandarin films. So his voice is literally entirely dubbed over by someone else. But for Bruce, he honestly didn't care. He believed a motion picture is exactly that. It's motion. You keep the dialogue to a minimum anyway. But then, you jump over to the Hollywood side, where he's playing Kato in the Green Hornet. Over there, he's navigating some really complex cultural hurdles. Like he actually noted that when he first arrived in the States, he couldn't even tell if a Caucasian person was putting him on or if they were genuinely angry. Why? Simply because a smile didn't mean the exact same thing across different cultures. It's like navigating a totally different language of human expression.
Moving on to Section 2, the philosophy of combat. Bridging cultural gaps. So the crucial point is that Bruce Lee wasn't just running your typical Hollywood gym. And this bridges perfectly into why massive A-list Hollywood stars were literally lining up to pay him for his time. These actors weren't hiring him just to learn how to throw a fake punch for an upcoming movie role. Not at all. Bruce taught that all knowledge ultimately leads to self-knowledge. So these heavy hitters were coming to him to learn how to express themselves through physical movement. Whether that meant physically acting out deep anger or laser-focused determination, he was teaching them the combative art of expressing the human body.
And this brilliantly illustrates the vast spectrum of what people actually extracted from his teachings. Just look at two of his most famous students. Take Steve McQueen, for example. Bruce noted that McQueen was just a fighter through and through. He had that raw toughness and natural instinct completely hardwired into him. Then on the flip side, you have James Coburn. Bruce described Coburn as a super mellow, peace-loving guy. And because of that temperament, Coburn's appreciation and grasp of the deep philosophical side of the martial arts was just on a whole different level. Same teacher, same art, but completely different human expressions. Which brings us to this absolutely incredible quote. Bruce viewed true martial artistry, true mastery, as a very delicate harmony. If you lean way too far into pure, raw, natural instinct, well, you become unscientific. But if you lean too far into strict, rigid control, you become a mechanical man, and you actually lose your humanity. The ultimate goal is to combine the two in perfect harmony, what he called unnatural naturalness or natural unnaturalness, yin-yang. This exact philosophy is why Bruce forcefully, and I mean forcefully, rejected the idea of traditional fighting styles. His argument was that styles separate men. He believed that unless human beings suddenly sprout 3 arms and 4 legs, we all basically have 2 hands and 2 feet, right? So if you create a rigid style, it becomes this unquestionable gospel truth, and you just stop growing. Real combat means utilizing every single part of your body, your feet, your elbows, even your thumbs, without any artificial boundaries. Let's dive into Section 3, Be Water, My Friend, the Longstreet breakout. This formless philosophy directly led to his massive breakout moment on American television in a show called Longstreet. In this one episode, which was aptly titled The Way of the Intersecting Fist, he basically just played himself. And he delivered this iconic, incredibly poetic piece of advice to the main character. He said, "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend." I mean, it's just incredibly powerful, isn't it? Let's break down how this translates into practical application. What does being water actually mean in real life? Well, it's about total adaptability. You pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You pour it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. It has the incredible capacity to flow smoothly, like a stream that never grows stale. But at the exact same time, it has the devastating power to crash forcefully when it needs to. It's the ultimate metaphor for continuous growth and complete formlessness. But ultimately, being water boils down to one incredibly difficult task: honestly expressing yourself without lying to yourself. And Bruce himself admitted this is really hard to do. It's super easy to put on a cocky show or perform a bunch of fancy, flashy movements. But to truly, honestly express yourself in a split second of combat or just in everyday life, you have to train your reflexes so intensely that when you determine to move, you just move. You become entirely one with the action. Which leads us to Section 4, Breaking Hollywood Stereotypes in the 1970s.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer, undeniable friction between what Bruce Lee wanted to create and what Hollywood was actually willing to accept. Look at his authentic vision versus the industry's harsh reality. Bruce wanted to make a television series called The Warrior, set in the Old West. Why? Because a Western setting historically justified all the unarmed combat, the punching, and the kicking. He wanted to showcase true, meaningful Oriental culture. But Hollywood executives? They were totally stuck in these outdated, racist, pigtail and bouncing around chop-chop caricatures. Early on, they even considered having him play Charlie Chan's #1 son. And maybe worst of all, many in the industry saw casting an Asian lead simply as a quote-unquote business risk. Because he was so intensely grounded in reality, facing all these hurdles, Bruce utterly rejected the vanity of fame. He literally called the word superstar an illusion. To him, it was just a fake label the public gives you. He didn't view himself as an idol or a star. His simple, true desire was to be recognized as a super actor, someone who deeply mastered their craft. This dynamic created a profound dual struggle for him. When he made films in Hong Kong, he was criticized by audiences for being too Americanized after living in the States for 12 years. But then, when he was working in Hollywood, the executives were constantly pushing him to be too exotic. He was literally caught right in the middle of everyone else's expectations, trying to navigate the unique advantages and the massive, massive problems of living in both of these worlds simultaneously.
And that brings us to Section 5, One Family Under Heaven, the Global Landscape.
This timeline gives us some absolutely vital context. 40 years prior to this 1971 interview, a Chinese actor starring in a major American production was basically a vague, impossible dream. It just wasn't happening. But in 1971, right as the Nixon administration was beginning to open relations with China, the whole geopolitical landscape was shifting. Bruce saw this changing era as an incredible opportunity. To him, an opening of borders meant more curiosity, a deeper mutual understanding, and a chance for rich cultural growth through contrast and comparison. All of this leads us to this deeply profound realization from the interview. When Pierre Berton asked him if he thought of himself as strictly Chinese or North American, Bruce Lee said he just wanted to think of himself as a human being. Quote, "Under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happens that people are different." I love that. He completely refused to be boxed in by geography, just exactly like he refused to be boxed in by rigid martial arts styles. And that brings us to our final takeaway. Bruce Lee's legacy isn't just about the blinding speed of his punch. It's about the total, unfiltered expression of the self. It's about overcoming massive cultural barriers and absolutely refusing to live a lie. So I want to leave you with this question to really reflect on. In a world that constantly tries to put you into specific styles, categories, and rigid labels, how do you honestly express yourself? Take some time to think about that and keep striving for that unnatural naturalness in your own life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.